Chapter 7 is looking at deviance, and I want to say, first of all, that deviance is universal. It exists in all societies, and it is defined as a variation from a set of norms or shared social expectations. A lot of the studies on deviance focuses on crime, okay, even though all deviant behavior is not criminal intent. Sociologists advocate what is known as a relativistic view of deviance that suggests that deviance can be interpreted only in the sociocultural context in which it happens. In other words, class, a 7-foot-tall person is not deviant in the context of professional basketball, or killing in the context of war, or a person wearing a bathing suit to a nudist beach would be considered deviant. So if deviance is relative rather than absolute, an act that is deviant in one context may not be deviant in another. Therefore, deviance doesn't consist merely of acts or behaviors, but it does consist of group responses, definitions, and meanings which are attached to behaviors. So therefore, we can certainly expect definitions of deviance to vary with circumstances. And some of the most important variations that affect definitions does concern time, place, situation, and social status. Variation by time, certainly an act considered to be deviant in one time period may be considered non-deviant in another. For example, in Auburn, buying alcohol on Sunday used to be unacceptable. Today it's legal. The practice of body piercing, tattooing have long been popular in other cultures and in certain subcultural groups in the United States. But deviant in other groups. And of course today body piercing and tattooing have entered the mainstream of American society. Variation by place, behaviors viewed as deviant in one location, society, or culture can be considered non-deviant in others. For example, in many cultures, having more than one wife is a sign of prestige, wealth, high status. Of course, in the United States, having more than one wife is a punishable offense. Variation by situation, behavior deemed as deviant in one situation may not be in another, even in the same time period and geographical area. For example, take a man dressed in women's clothing to act in a play would be considered normal, but a man dressed in women's clothes in the audience wouldn't be. And deviance does vary with social status. The status is associated with a person's age, sex, race, income, will all influence which of his or her behaviors are considered to be deviant. There are many explanations for deviance. The biological context of deviance looks at genetic and environmental factors, especially abuse early in life, predictors of adult crime and violence. But what we want to look at is some sociological theories on deviance. In Robert Merton's strain theory, it's also known as anomie. This theory focuses on value conflicts between culturally prescribed goals and socially approved ways of achieving those goals. And Robert Merton listed 5 ways that people adapt to the goals of a culture and the institutionalized means of achieving those goals. We've got conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. Only conformity to both the goals and the means is considered to be non-deviant. The rest of them are deviant. For example, let's say your goal in this class is to make an A. You do everything that's required, you take notes, you come to class, you study, you have conformed, therefore you are not deviant. Innovators accept the goals, but they reject the means. For example, students want a good grade, but they cheat. Here you're using unconventional means such as street crimes rather than conventional means, which is hard work, to achieve a cultural goal such as wealth. Ritualist rejects the goals, but they accept the means, say an officer manager who spends all of his or her time making sure employees come to work on time. By focusing on petty rules, he or she loses sight of the real goal of the office. To give you another example, many people may believe they can't achieve the cultural goal of becoming rich, so they stick to the rules or conventional means in order to at least feel respectful. Retreatists reject the goals and the means. These are regarded as a social liability. So these are unconventional lifestyles and willingness to live this way. And then rebels, they reject the goals and the means, but they find a substitution. Another theory is labeling theory. This theory focuses on why certain people and certain acts are singled out as being deviant, and they also want to know what are the effects of being labeled deviant. Now, Edwin Lamert identified two categories of deviance. We've got primary deviance and we've got secondary deviance. Primary deviance involves behavior that violates social norms, but it's temporary and sporadic. Individuals who are involved in primary deviance do not regard themselves as deviant, and they're not regarded as deviant by others. Secondary deviance involves habitual violation of norms by individuals who not only see themselves as deviant, but they're also labeled deviant by others. And of course, secondary deviance becomes a routine, resulting in a label that leads to further deviance. Medicalization of deviance. This is the transformation of moral and legal deviance into a medical condition. For example, alcoholism, promiscuity, child abuse, homosexuality. Class, we are now sick rather than bad, so we're just more or less swapping one label for another. Another theory, differential association by Edwin Sutherland. This theory explains deviance as a learned behavior that is determined by the extent of a person's interaction with individuals who already practice the behavior. So class, it depends on the amount of contact with other people who encourage or rejects conventional behavior. Then we have Travis Hershey's control theory. According to Travis Hershey, social control depends on people's anticipating the consequences of their actions. And he links conformity to 4 different types of social control. Here we have attachment, opportunity, involvement, and belief. With attachment, certainly connections to other people is going to make it more likely that you're going to take their feelings and concerns into account. You're going to more likely act in responsible ways. Commitment, certainly people's investment in society tempers their behavior. For example, class, rates of criminal activity are lower for married people and for those who hold jobs. Involvement, this is being involved with people who are non-deviant, being involved in non-deviant activities. You have less time for delinquent behavior. People who simply hang out have the time and energy to engage in deviant behavior. Beliefs, here we're talking about strong beliefs in conventional morality, respect for authority figures. It certainly does restrain tendencies toward deviance. People with a weak conscience and certainly children who are left unsupervised are more open to temptation. And opportunity, there's actually 5, but your textbook only lists 4. But opportunity, certainly the greater a person's access to legitimate opportunity, the greater the advantages of conformity. A person with little confidence in future success is certainly more likely to drift toward deviance. There are different types of crimes. We have crimes against the person. These include or involve violence or the threat of violence. For example, homicide, aggravated assault, rape, robbery. Crimes against property involve taking something of value that belongs to someone else. For example, larceny, theft, automobile theft, burglary, arson. Victimless crimes, this is no apparent victim. You're not causing any harm to anyone but yourself. And that's why a lot of people believe they should be decriminalized, such as gambling, public drunkenness, prostitution, illegal drug use, and we can go on and on and on with some examples of those. We also have white-collar corporate crime. These are committed by higher status persons or by businesses and organizations. Some examples would be embezzlement, fraud, false advertising, stock and bond manipulation, price fixing. We can go on and on with those.